Welcome to this episode of the Women and Money Cafe. It's not sexy and it's not cool, and we don't really talk about it, but it is one of the cornerstones of financial resilience, and that is insurance. So, in today's episode, we're going to be looking specifically at insurance and how that plays a part in your overall financial planning, what's important about it, what you might want to consider, and busting some of those myths. Now, obviously, I know a little bit about this, but I thought it would make sense to bring along an expert. So I've trawled the UK and I found what I believe is the UK's leading expert in insurance, and that is Kathryn Knowles. So, Kathryn, welcome to the cafe.
Hi, it's lovely to be here, and I love the intro. I'm like, this isn't sexy or cool. So now I'm sat here thinking, unsexy, uncool. That's how I
I'm
feel.
I'm not saying you're not sexy and cool, okay?
So it's okay. I'm full of cold, so I'm certainly not at the moment.
So, obviously, you're known within the industry for the work that you do for championing insurance and just making sure that people are educated and they know about it. And I know that you do your videos, your podcasts, which all us advisors listen to, and we've got charities and insurance companies listening to it as well. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am an insurance advisor. So I work in the space which is known as the protection insurance space. There are two kind of different departments when it comes to insurance, and I work really within the protection side and be things like life insurance, critical illness cover, and income protection. I'm sure we'll chat through all of these, but there's lots of different ways of setting these policies up. There's lots of quirks with each insurer as to what works well with them, what maybe doesn't work well with them. I do that in the UK and internationally, and I do it for individuals. I also do it for businesses as well.
So we were chatting just before we started recording, and I was saying to you that, on the podcast, we're all about empowering women around money and educating people and helping them start ISAs, start pensions, and what have you. And I said, it's all very well as running around, throwing money at investments, what have you. But if we haven't done the basics right at the start, it all falls down. And those basics are, it is making sure that we're protected and we're insured. So you've mentioned a few different ways that we can protect and insure ourselves there. But I'm just wondering, from a very sort of starting point of what is the point of insurance? Why do we have it?
So insurance is all about giving either yourself or a loved one financial security if something happens, essentially. So for the three different insurance I mentioned, so life insurance, that's really quite hopefully self-explanatory. It basically means that if you were to die, the insurer will pay out some money. So that is there's a little bit of a quirk where it might pay out a little bit earlier, but that's a little bit of something I'll go into another area maybe later on in the discussion. But let's just say it's generally if you pass away, that somebody that you want to receive the money, who's maybe going to be financially going to struggle without you there, is going to receive that money there. And so quite simple, straightforward. The other two insurances can get a little bit more confusing when we look at them because there's so many options. So the other one I mentioned, first of all, was critical illness cover. So that is where you would get a chunk of money if you were diagnosed with what's a critical illness. And sometimes it can come in with certain definitions and things like that, but probably going a bit too technical. Let's just say cancer, heart attack, stroke. When we're talking about things that are going to be conditions that are really not going to be pleasant, it can pay out the insurance. And it just means that you can then do lots and lots of different things if you want with that money, but it's giving you a bit financial peace of mind just while you need to recover. Or potentially, if it is a condition that maybe is going to last a long time, maybe some Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis, that you can put things in place to feel financially secure for hopefully the rest of your life. And then we have income protection. And it's really important with income protection because a lot of people can think of this in different ways. It's all about protecting your income if you are ill and unable to work. So it's not there as unemployment cover. It's not there in terms of you've got a fixed contract and then the fixed contract ends and it'll carry on paying your money. It's all about if you are ill and unable to work. And the whole point of that policy is that if you do become ill, you can't work, the insurer will pay you some of your money every month, potentially right up to your retirement age, depending on how the policy is set up. And that's one that I think really stands out to me as being incredibly important because, as you were saying, we're talking about investments, pensions, everything like that, which are brilliant things, incredibly powerful things to have, but they're all reliant upon money. and are we planning to bring up income
Mm.
and being able to keep putting funds into them to be able to reach that goal that your advisor has put in place for you. So if you do fall ill, if you are unable to work, you don't have an insurance policy in place, then all of those brilliant plans that you put in place, in terms of the pension investments, they're all going to start to drop and they're all going to start to potentially crumble. Obviously, there's some people that have such significant investments and pensions that they'd be okay, or they might be close to that retirement age that everything is fine. But with a lot of people, there is, especially if we're talking 20s, 30s, 40s, there's a lot of time period there where if we can't put into a pensions, we can't put into pensions, then we're going to start to really struggle to meet our financial goals for retirement.
I think that's a really good point. So I'm in my 40s. I'm at the higher end of the 40s. But if I don't have my salary coming in, the money that I save into my pension on a monthly basis, that can't happen. The money I put into my ISA on a monthly basis, that can't happen. All my little spaces on Zupa and Starling, they're not getting populated either. So everything, I've got this amazing financial plan, but it is all heavily dependent on my salary being there.
Exactly. And with the pension as well, this is going out of my area, so but it's definitely into yours. The pension, you can only access it at certain ages. And then the investments, you could have some nice investments there, but if the income's not coming in, instead of putting into it, you're going to need to probably start drawing on them. And there's some really, so when I do some training for advisors and different people, I'll do what's known as the cash flow modeling. And it's not something that I do as an advisor, but it's something that, I was able to access and sort of say, like, let's use some case study scenario. It's something that's usually done by the cash flow modelers, by the full financial advisors such as yourself. And it was that 2 case studies of saying, like, this is someone where everything goes absolutely perfectly for the whole life that we're very, very happy for. And then this is a situation where someone mid to late 40s, there is a diagnosis of cancer, they're not able to work for a time period, and this is what happens. It's really shocking how quickly things can go. And ultimately, could be saved by having something like an income protection policy in place. And it's really surprising as well sometimes how much people think how expensive they could be compared to what they actually can be. And it's definitely something I would always suggest to anybody who's working at all and taking an income, that they definitely look at it. You can sometimes look at it in other situations if you're not taking an income, because sometimes be like a bit of a house person's benefit type situation, but usually it is for employed income. It's not for things like state benefits or anything like that. You can't insure.
Okay, so quick question there. So what we're saying is income protection, we are big fans of it. I've got a policy, but what you were saying there is it's ensuring employed income. So what if I'm self-employed? Can I still have an income protection policy then?
Absolutely. The main thing to know that if you're self-employed, it just depends upon how you are set up as self-employed as well, because there's different ways of doing them. So what's really good is that if you're self-employed, you can have it. The key thing though is just be very aware of what might happen at the time of the claim. So if you're self-employed, there can just be a little bit more evidence that you need to give to the insurer that you've not been able to work and that the business is having to stop, in a sense, because you are ill. If you are in a limited company, there's potentially more people working with you, or even if you are just on your own limited company, sometimes it can be a little bit easier. There can be some really, really positive options in terms of arranging policies where the premiums are paid for by the company that can be offset against corporation tax, which is always a really lovely thing that especially small business owners do like to hear if we can do things like that.
All right, so that's right. So you're explaining to me that essentially we've got this kind of insurance where if I'm unable to work due to ill health, then it's going to start paying me an income, which means I'm not having to raid my ISA and my savings to supplement my income because I had plans for that money. The plans were
Yeah.
not to look after me when I was not well. And so I think people might be sitting there listening to us right now and go, yeah, that sounds great, Kathryn and Julie, but, right, do these things actually work? Because insurance companies, they never pay out, is what I'm going to guess a lot of people are thinking.
I know, and it's so hard, but that's the thing, though, is that, and it's really difficult to say, is because obviously insurance overall is brilliant, but as I say, there's kind of 2 departments when it comes to insurance. And in the protection side, we have incredible claim statistics. So, in terms of the life insurance, the critical illness cover, we're often up to like 98% successful claim rates in terms of those policies. For income protection, I think it's around the same number, but I don't want to say it in case I put it wrong. But it's, we're talking high 90s in terms of the successful payouts. Now, I know because I'm exactly the same. I would say now that, well, what, I'd be the 2%. I'd absolutely be the 2% that it wouldn't work for. That's just me and my luck. Now, when we are talking about that 2% that don't pay out, there's a couple of reasons why that tends to happen. And, sometimes, obviously, there are times when claims cannot go the way that we would expect them to. And if you do use some guidelines, that they can step in and really, really help. And we do quite a bit of pro bono work for people as well who maybe had a decision that they didn't expect. We would step in and the insurers come kind of thing and sort of get involved that way. But the times that these insurances don't pay out, if somebody has, if we talk about the income protection side of things, so that could be if somebody has tried to claim on the policy, they're not actually able to claim on it. So as an example, it can be. So income protection is something where there sometimes can be exclusions. So if you've had something in the past, you can find there'd maybe be an exclusion on the policy. So a really good example of that would be, let's say somebody's played tennis and they've got tennis elbow and they've had that diagnosed in the last couple of years. When they apply for income protection, they might well have an exclusion for that elbow from their policy and being able to claim on it. Either all the time, policy's active, or it might be for a few years or so. It depends upon the insurer that you use. And so maybe that person at some point has just forgotten that there's that exclusion, then they've tried to, and then the insurer said, well, actually, you're claiming for that elbow, and ultimately we can't cover that. So that goes against the insurer and their statistics. Not a nice situation for anybody involved, obviously, but that is the other thing that when we tend to see that these things happen are two main areas. That one, that unfortunately the premiums haven't been kept up to date for the policy, or maybe the policy has actually ended due to lack of payment and somebody tries to claim, and unfortunately the policy just isn't active anymore. The other thing, it's completely gone out of my head now. I had it right there at the front of my mind.
Oh, don't worry. I've got perimenopause, so that happens to me all the time. So can I just check something with you anyway? So we've got this 2% or so where the claims are not successful. And you're telling me that 2% is part of that is people, when we claim for things that we were never able to claim for anyway. So on my income protection, I've got the stress and anxiety exclusion. So if I try and claim, let's say 5 years time, I get depressed and I can't work. And I try and claim. And obviously, I've got an exclusion, so I can't claim for that. That's going to make up part of the 2%. Seems a bit harsh on the insurers. Can't believe I'm saying that, but never mind. So that's one aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing as well, absolutely, just pop back to my mind now, is non-disclosure. Now, this is a really, really tricky one because non-disclosure has different levels. Basically, non-disclosure would mean that somebody's applied for insurance and the application isn't being completely truthful. Now, sometimes it can be a mistake. Sometimes it is deliberate. And obviously, I'm assuming people who are listening, it would be this version where it's going to be a mistake. Now, the reason that we can have those mistakes is that sometimes people just forget things. When it says to you, have you seen your GP or had some medication in the last 2 years? It's hard sometimes to think what you've done in the last 2 years, and especially when we had lockdown, for quite a while after lockdown, I was convinced it was still 2020 because I'd completely lost this time. But then also, what we do find as well is that medical reports often have incorrect details in them. And that's really, really hard to disprove. And that's not me having a go at anybody who's sort of like the NHS or anything like that. The NHS is phenomenal. I absolutely adore it. But we do see errors in it. And because my clients do tend to be people who maybe need a bit of extra help in terms of medical underwriting, I do see reports from GPs quite regularly and go through them. And the amount of times I would say to somebody, like, we've discussed all this, but I just want to check with you. The GP's mentioned this. Is that right? And they're straight away saying, I've never heard that before in my life. That's nothing to do with me. And they have to get their records corrected. And so we sometimes find as well that people speak to us and they've maybe been declined insurance elsewhere. We get a copy of those medical records, go through them, and actually the decline has come from the fact there's an error in the report rather than the person not being able to get the insurance at all. And it's just a simple way of changing the forms and getting it corrected. But it's very, very hard. If you've got a policy in place 10 years ago, you then put in a claim and then the GP's reports from says, well, 12 years ago, you had X, Y, Z. It's very hard to try and disprove that depending upon what it is that is being said. And that can potentially the claim, and unfortunately as well, generally the insurers must go by what the medical reports say, what the GP reports say. So it's often on the person to prove in a sense if there is an error that there has been an error.
Right.
And that's where, again, we tend to find the issues. So I'm certainly not saying that the insurers get it right all the time, but there are definitely things that cause that percentage to be there. And unfortunately, we are trying to do a lot in the advisor space to try and help with that. But it's all about just trying to make sure that we get everything right from the start.
All right, that's really interesting. So I think people's perception of insurance companies and maybe some of their behavior, but what you're describing there is you've got three potential parties involved. You've got the individual, the GP, and the insurance. No disrespect to the other two parties. The insurer is probably the more reliable source of information there, isn't it?
Well, it's really difficult because, obviously, especially with the way that people feel about insurance, because I obviously completely appreciate so much activity towards the insurance space. And there's a lot of us who are trying our absolute hardest to sort of like make sure that we talk about the positives. It's very hard because talking about the positive outcomes can be quite tricky compared to the negative ones. The negative ones, as with anything in life, people want to shout out about it, say this has been done and it's wrong, which is absolutely no right to do so. But when you've had the positive outcomes, that's really sensitive because a lot of the time a positive outcome has been insurance wise because someone has passed away or someone has been able to claim because they've had a diagnosis of breast cancer or they've developed Parkinson's and can no longer work anymore. And it's not really easy to say to people in that situation, oh, by the way, do you mind doing a story to say how wonderful insurance is? It's a very, very personal time. And I don't feel comfortable asking people about that. I have tried before in the past, and it makes me really uncomfortable. So I don't do it anymore. So, but yeah, it's really, really hard. What I always say is, and especially if anybody's applying for insurance and anybody says, oh, we're doing a GP report, do you want to see it before it goes to the insurer or not? I always say, see it. Get a copy of it, because then you can check what's right. If you're using an advisor like myself, I can check what's in there as well and make sure there's nothing in there we don't expect. And then we can speak to the insurers quite openly as well if there is anything in there and weren't expecting. Because everybody, data protection wise, obviously was very guarded about the information that's being shared with different places.
All right, that's a good top tip there because I can remember seeing that box that you tick it or don't tick it. Do you want to see the GP report? According to Kathryn, we always want to see the report. So always
I
tick that
always want
box.
there are other advisor firms who will completely disagree with me because it can delay things, and which isn't great, obviously, but is delayed. But you get a copy. If they can't give you a copy, take pictures on your phone of every single page. Make sure you can see the full page, the corners of the page and everything. So that if there is any queries, you can say, well, actually, this is what it said. And then also, if there's something in there, and I've had it before where we've had a number of cases where there's been a thing of somebody where it suddenly said they were diabetic in the middle of the GP reports. They've never been diabetic at all, but it changes the outcome that they
Just a
were
little
given the
bit.
insurance. Yeah, absolutely. There was someone else where they'd said to me that they drank 67 drinks a year, and that's what they told someone. But whoever filled in the form chose the wrong drop down and said 67 drinks a day. And that was causing them to get depressed everywhere, So there's lots of things in even cancer diagnoses. We do have it where people have had a certain cancer diagnosis, and the GP is possibly writing a more severe diagnosis to the insurer. And then that also causes a big emotional thing for people as well, because obviously then they kind of, well, hang on a minute, which is right. Did I actually have it? They've already gone through the emotional trauma of having cancer. And then, is it worse than what I thought it was? And it can, unfortunately, sometimes just be a little bit of human error.
All right. So I think that leads us on nicely then to one of the things that I hear people say, and I'm sure that you've heard it as well, is some people won't even bother trying to get any of the insurances that you're describing, Kathryn, because like if I didn't do what I did, I might be thinking there's no point me trying to get income protection or critical illness because I'm good because of anxiety and depression or mental health issues, what have you. So I'm not even going to bother trying. Now I know I'm probably just going to get an exclusion. So people that are sitting there thinking, well, I won't get cover because I've got X, Y, and Z, and because my mom had this and my dad had that, and it's a family
Yes.
history. So people sitting there thinking, I won't get cover. Have you got any words of wisdom for them?
I always think there's no hardship in trying. There's no hardship in asking. And there's quite a few things that sort of like pick up with what you were saying. Because family medical history, especially for women, can really have an influence on the insurances. But I think what's important to share as well is I'll share my story. So I have lived with generalized anxiety disorder for many years now, 17 years. And when I first went for insurance in 2010, I was declined by all but two insurers. And that was because of my mental health. And I didn't have what the insurers classed now, any of the serious concerns that could come with mental health. I'd had no suicide attempts, no self-harm, hospitalized, anything like that. But yet only two insurers were prepared to look at me for life insurance, and it was an increased premium as well. Now, I went for insurance in 2016 and I had standard terms. And I
Wow.
had a lot of insurers to choose. The the insurers are constantly watching the markets. And what they also do is they're looking at statistics all the time, and they need decades worth of statistics to make their decision.
Hmm.
And so even for me, in that 6 years, the options were phenomenal. Another area, and it's very, very specific area. HIV is a really important one. Until the last couple of years, we were, in terms of HIV and life insurance, and the others as well, I'll mention, we had things like they could only have a certain amount of time, maximum 20 years, sometimes a maximum sum assured, and it was all at increased premiums. And in the last couple of years, we now have potentially life insurance at standard rates. It means no premium
Right.
increases, no exclusions. We now have the potentially for critical illness cover on the standard market and income protection as well. Until recently, the income protection was very specialist policies. And it was a case of only a couple of years per claim if you were going to do it. Whereas now they can potentially go right to retirement age. And I'm not saying that everybody who's listening would be in that situation, but what I do want to show is that we've gone from with that a condition that was seen very, very outdated medical thoughts in
Hmm.
terms of the insurance underwriting decisions. And in a couple of years, we have seen things change so much. And it's if you need the insurance, there is usually an option of some sort. And whether or not it's personal insurance, and that's something you arrange yourself, you pay for yourself. There are many insurers with lots of different options. And we've had it where people have come to us, as I say, they've been declined somewhere else, but they've then spoken to us and we've got them normal terms, so regular pricing with somebody else. And it's just sometimes knowing which insurers, right? Because every insurer has different things that they're happy to insure or not. So you'll have one insurer, well, you'll have a few insurers. I can't say one or anyone. Unfortunately, I can't say this one's good for this or that, but you'll have maybe insurer A that's brilliant for mental health and diabetes and high BMI, but they're maybe not great for diagnosis of breast cancer or prostate cancer. Whereas another insurer might be amazing for breast cancer, prostate cancer, but then not be so good for BMI. It's not easy. It really, really isn't easy, which is why you have advice myself out there trying to help people because it is an absolute minefield. And each insurer has so many options for each insurance as well. But as well, the family medical history side of things, that's really important, especially for women. So for women, it is with critical illness cover, especially. It can be quite common if you maybe had your parents, your mum has maybe breast cancer at a youngish age, so we're talking anywhere between 30 to 50, that some insurers might put a breast cancer exclusion on your critical illness policy. Now, even more so than that, some insurers could put a full cancer exclusion on. That is hugely different. A full cancer exclusion versus a breast cancer exclusion, phenomenally different. So it's so important to look out for that wording. And another thing as well, because especially again, I know your audience is women, if you have had a test for the BRCA gene, the insurer is not allowed to ask you about that. So when it comes to things like genetic tests, and sometimes people say to me, well, which one did I have? And so a genetic test, a predictive test, that's where a family member has a condition and they've said to you, or you've been told, we should probably just do a bit of a screen and just check if you've got this gene. So that you've got no symptoms, there's no sort of like thoughts that you maybe have the cancer yourself. It's just purely about, is this a trait within your family? I can't ask you about that. If it was more of a diagnostic test where you have had some symptoms and maybe they are wondering about it, then, that would be either wondering whether or not you've developed the cancer, then that would be different. But for things like the genetic test, the BRCA gene especially, because a lot of people do ask about that, they are not allowed to ask you about that. That's all when you're getting insurances.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Okay. Thank you for saying that. We were talking before that insurance is reasonably straightforward. We pay the insurance company X per month, and if something bad happens to us, they pay out cash. So as a concept, it's quite simple. But then what you're describing there is the reality then of a real person with real health and real life trying to approach an insurer, assuming that you're not in A1 grade A health, which most people my age aren't. Then it's knowing today they like you, tomorrow they don't, but that company over there might really like you. And it's just really underlining the value of having someone like yourself that knows it inside out. So I guess one thing is for the listeners, if you're sitting there and you have tried to get insurance, and maybe you have been declined or the terms you were offered weren't quite what you wanted, then maybe go back and have a look at it. This is where people like Kathryn come into the role because, as you were saying, the difference between having a breast cancer exclusion and just having a cancer exclusion, that's day and night, isn't it?
It's absolutely huge. Another thing as well, I'll just going back to what you were saying in terms of your age and what you said about perimenopause and things like that as well, and on your listener base, insurers don't expect stuff like HRT and things like that. So it'll specifically say on the questions, we are not asking you about HRT and stuff like that. Because there'll be a question about have you taken any medications, things like that in the last few years. If you have opted to go for things like antidepressants of HRT, that can come up in the question set. But if it is to do with menopause, for life insurance and critical illness cover, it shouldn't cause any concerns. On the income protection side, we can sometimes have some queries about that. But I think as well, something that's just popped into my head is that we are a lot of women who are probably around the age that you are talking about. There's been sort of a bit of an increase at times of people, and there's statistics around this of women who are maybe in a position where they're separated from a partner. Maybe the word joint insurance is in place, or the other partner was doing a lot of the insurances, and now the women are kind of starting off on their own. And there's quite a lot of research to show that a lot of women don't, in a sense, want to necessarily use an advisor, or that their instinct is to try and do it as much themselves. And that's absolutely fine. Help work for people. But ultimately, if there is anything that we're just saying, if there's anything that could potentially pop up in the question set, it is a good idea to speak to somebody who can just help you figure out what you need as well. Because with life insurance, we have term life insurance, we've decreasing term life insurance, we've got increasing, we've got level, we've got whole of life insurance, we've got family income benefit. We've got gifting to BVOS as well. We've got so many things that can suddenly come into play, and try to figure out how much you need for each of those insurances. It's fine. It's understanding it as well, because you were saying about how we pay into an insurance, a payout. But sometimes, because people, again, the age group for the audience, they'll maybe remember a lot of the old insurances, which sometimes people would call them maybe an endowment style insurance policy, or they might have heard of it along the lines of with profit. And they're really available now in the UK. So somebody could go through all this process, go, brilliant. So at the end of 20 years, I'm still here, I've not died. What do I get in return? And we have to say as an advisor, well, nothing. And that can be really difficult for people, because they're kind of like, well, hang on a minute, if I'm paying into this, what happens to all those policies where you'd earn you'd like a bit of a value, a bit of an investment? Well, unfortunately, they're not around anymore. And I'm not allowed to say this. I always say this to every person I speak to.
You're going to say it anyway, though, aren't you, Kathryn?
So life insurance is not like car insurance in any way, shape, or form. However, sometimes we think of the payments. It can help to think of it that way. So car insurance, we take it out, we pay for it every month or yearly. And at the end of the year, if we've not had an accident, we think, amazing, wonderful, car's all right, fantastic. And we don't expect a refund from the insurer. That's what's happening in things like the life insurance, the critical illness, income protection policies that are available now. We're paying into it as a just in case. And at the end, if we've got claims, the brilliant return from that is that one passed away, we've not been seriously ill, or we've not been so well that we've not been unable to work. And it's really important to know that there isn't a return at the end of these policies now.
So if you want a prize at the end is nothing bad happened to you.
Exactly. And it's really hard, because some people go, absolutely. And some people really don't feel that way at all. And they're like, well, no, I want something back at the end, and it's unfortunately just doesn't work in the UK anymore. If you've got a policy like that already, absolutely fine. It'll carry on doing what it's meant to have been doing. but setting up new policies now isn't going to be something that's really going to be available.
Okay, so we've covered so far the idea of what if it doesn't pay out and will they cover me and the reasons why we might need it. So you've been doing this a long time and you are the expert in it. What do you think is the number one thing that would be easy for anybody to go in action to?
I don't know if it's easy, but what I would say is do a spreadsheet if you can, or piece of paper, whatever works for you, and write down exactly what insurances you have, where they're at, your policy numbers, the amount that you're insured for, end date. Really important to think at the end date because it can very quickly jump upon you. Set something up 22 years and you're suddenly at year 19. The premium. So, and also double checking with that premium. Is it fixed or is it changing over time? Because sometimes that can happen. People don't recognize that either. So just really keep an eye on that. See where you are. And then have a look and think, what does this mean to me? Have I covered all the bases? If you have life insurance, okay. If there's a mortgage in place, is there life insurance there just in case to help a child or partner or someone else to be able to pay off that mortgage if need be? We are starting to go into a little bit of now financial advice, so we'll just be careful not to go into that too much on the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, the critical illness side of things, generally, at least we want at least 3 to 5 years worth of income, ideally covered by a critical illness cover policy, because then if something does happen, at least then you've got a good chunk of money to help you. Obviously, financial advisors absolutely worth their weight in gold kind of thing, because they can really help to put all of this into play as well. And another thing as well is probably there's a really interesting concept that's happening that I think I should probably mention. And I spoke about this on my podcast a while ago. And it's what's known as intergenerational wealth planning, which is a really fancy way sometimes describing how we maybe talk as between children and their parents about these insurances. So sometimes with younger generations, where obviously completely feel invincible, they won't often take out these policies and they'll go, oh, well, my mum and dad will look after me. So we're actually starting to see it now sometimes where parents are paying for the policies, the income protection for their kids. So I go, well, actually, if something happens to you, you're not getting my pension investment. I worked hard for that. You can have this insurance policy to help you. And obviously, the younger you are, the cheaper it is to take it out. And so even if the child, in a sense, obviously I say child, or someone over 18 who is in work, even if they're not wanting this insurance or thinking it's relevant, just saying, well, look, just in case, sensibly, I just don't want to lose all my money. It's not like if something were to happen. But then on the other way as well, if there's anything like any kind of inheritance tax planning, it's not necessarily the person who's having the insurance taken out, and it could be that the children pay for the policy. So for the parents to sort of go, well, actually, we're the ones that are going to benefit from this insurance, so we'll pay for it. So there's lots and lots of ways to talk about these insurances. It doesn't have to be all upon the one person to handle it. It is really a lot of the time a family affair. And yeah, I think that's the key thing. Get the spreadsheet, figure out what you actually need to do. Do speak to somebody. Just a lot of people, as I say, no obligation chats, but at least at the start. And then you can start to just feel more confident, I think, in terms of what's going to happen. If something, let's face it, like you said, this isn't sexy, this isn't cool. We're talking about whole things here. We're talking about death. We're talking about diagnosis of conditions that people are scared of. And we are at a point where cancer in itself is now, it's more than 1 in 2 people now will have a diagnosis of cancer at some point in their life. We are talking about real things really, really do hit people.
I think that's really important, actually. To a certain extent, it's when, not if, is what you're suggesting there.
Unfortunately, and we're not allowed to scare people. I certainly don't want to scare people, but this is happening. And the fact that we live so much longer as well now, which is fantastic. It means that a lot of these conditions that are seen as critical, that are paid out for, more and more of them are being diagnosed.
All right, so I really like that idea, though, of getting either a spreadsheet or a pen and paper and just getting to grips with what you've got. Oddly enough, I did this the other week for mine. And what you were saying about the terms. So first of all, these are a variety of life covers that I've taken out over the years, all with different companies, but now all technically with Aviva, except for one, because Aviva bought everybody. And it
I
was
know which way you've gone with those ones who bought out and bought out and bought out. Yeah.
so, and I was sitting there and I was working out, trying to figure out, have I got enough cover? Because I know the term will be up soon. Because I'll have taken some of these out when I first started in financial services, which was a little while ago. And I'm trying to figure out where I'm up to. So even I lost track of it. So I think that's a great exercise for people to do. And if you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, it's not cool and it's not sexy, but it's very sensible, so I'm going to do it. And you want a little bit of help with it, or you want to know more about what Kathryn does. Kathryn, how can people get in touch with you and follow you?
Well, I'm on social media, so please do feel free to follow me on there. It will also be random grumblings about my current state of man flu and my children at times and all this kind of stuff. But I'm on Twitter. I'm Kathryn_Cura. I am on things like LinkedIn as well, which would be my full name, Knowles. And there is our website, which is curainsurance.co.uk. You can always contact me that way. There is the podcast as well. So if anybody does have anything where they're thinking, I'm not too sure as to whether or not how our insurance would be for me. There's lots and lots of episodes on there where we really deep dive into different medical conditions or different, what the insurers call risks. And that's known as the Practical Protection Podcast. So if you've got any podcast platforms, search for that, search for my name, and that's fine. And then just one little extra thing that I've not mentioned just yet. When you are doing that spreadsheet and you're finding the insurers that you're with and everything like that, insurers now offer a lot of extras known as value added benefits. Now, they are not contractual, and sometimes they're offered to every existing client. Sometimes it's from people who've taken a policy from your ex or whatever. And they can include things like mental health support service, nutrition advice, exercise advice, sometimes access to GPs with your GP 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they come with your policy at no extra cost. So do check it out. Have a look on your insurer's website. Do a search for that kind of thing. If maybe ring them up and just say, look, what can I access? And that can be so powerful for you. Sometimes children are included as well, depending upon their ages and if they're still kind of seen as a child in the eyes of the insurer to you. So there's lots and lots that come with insurance now, not just about the financial returns. So definitely check everything out. More than happy to speak to anybody at all, even if it's just a case of trying to point you in the right direction.
All right. I can testify to how good your podcast is. So it's like this treasure trove library of everything you ever want to know about protection, but we're too afraid to ask. It's all in there.
That's what I aim.
All right. So as we wrap things up, Kathryn, in the cafe, we like to say we're curious about people and we're genuinely interested. I'm just nosy. I've got to be honest. I'm just nosy. And so we like to ask our guests a question at the end just to find out a little bit more about them.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if there's anything you'd like to share with us about a book that you've read recently.
So the book that always stands out in my mind when people ask me, and I do forgive me because I'm sure that probably the majority of people are not going to want to read this. It's called The Master and Margarita, and it's Russian literature. I did not read it in Russian. I read it in English translation. My sister always makes fun of me for my book choices, because ever since I was little, I have to say I'm a little bit of an oddity. I now know that is because I'm autistic. And so I'm not saying that people are autistic or odd, it's just my book choices definitely go full on that side of things. And I used to read Shakespeare at the age of 7. I absolutely adore. I know, I'm that person. And I just loved it. It was so bizarre and random, and I just became completely immersed in this very, very random.
What's it called again? The Margarita and the Master.
Master and Margarita.
The Master and Margarita.
And so I love that. And if somebody wants something that's more probably mainstream, probably say The Life of Pi. I probably came to that quite late in the scheme of things. But again, it was just one of those ones that it's, when you have a book, I have like a book rating system between 1 and 5. And number 5 means I'll read it again. Both in my read it again piles.
All right, give us a little clue, a little hint to what this Master and Margarita's about.
Okay, it's all about yes, it's an insight into my mind, isn't it? It's all about these people in Russia, and I can't remember the time frame, but it is older kind of time frame. And it's all about how the devil has come to Russia and how he's kind of a person there, and that he's got these, I don't say groupies, but he's got people with him who are there who are strange, and how he kind of influences people's lives, how people are maybe drawn in by him, and it's, don't even think I can describe it.
A curiosity is peak now.
So bizarre. I think it'd be much better, obviously, if you've been to Russia and you knew the streets, everything they mentioned. But as long as you can get past the fact that for me, there weren't usual names of streets or unusual names of people that I would expect. It's certainly different to English names. And so every now and then I had to think to myself, right, which one's this one again? And I just really, it was just quirky. I love things that are quirky. It's absolutely, absolutely adorable.
Right, I've written it down.
She's going to say to me, why? Why get you talking?
Well, I'm going to go away and I'm going to check it out. I'm going to get the sample version that you can get on Kindle, or I'll check out the library and see how I get on.
Contact me. You'll contact me after to just go, why did you mention that? Just think of Life of Pi.
Kathryn, it could be that was bloody amazing. Is there a follow-up?
No, Life of Pi was so good. It's just, the certain ones that really, really get to you, isn't it? And where the claw dancing, I know they're doing a film of that soon, but I'm really glad I read the book, because that, again, is such a powerful book. Really, really loved it. And my book club as one of our favoriteest books.
Right, so it's rated a 5 across the board then.
It was rated 5, I believe, across the board.
All right, well, thank you for sharing 2 book suggestions with us. I will personally be getting back in touch with you about the Master and Margarita to let you know how I get on. But
I'm going to get Twitter messages now as I have people going, what have you got me reading? Fine. Talk to me about that as well. We don't need to talk about insurance. Talk to me about my weird love for Russian literature.
All right. Well, it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining us and sharing all your wealth of knowledge with us. And to you, listeners, thank you for listening. And do go and follow Kathryn and get in touch. And if you've enjoyed the show, you know what I'm going to say. Go and leave us a review. It really helps. But until next time, please take care of yourselves.